Are you wondering why your fishing buddy is pulling in absolute monsters right next to you, while your live well is completely empty? Let me ask you a very direct question. Are you absolutely sure you are not fishing like it is the middle of July right now? I see it happen every single year. Anglers hit the water in early spring, fully expecting a massive feeding frenzy, and they go home with nothing but a sunburn and a bad attitude. Today we are going to talk about the brutal truth of early spring fishing. I am going to reveal a massive mistake that 99% of fishermen make without even realizing it. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will have a sudden realization about why your favorite lures are suddenly worthless. We are going to break a lot of those old grandpa fishing rules today. I want to know right now, before we even start, what is your go-to lure when the water is freezing? Drop it in the comments below, because I am willing to bet you are fishing it entirely wrong. Before we get to the core problem, we need to understand the environment we are dealing with. The transition from winter to spring is the most confusing time for an angler. The calendar says it is spring. The stores are selling new fishing gear, but the water itself is still trapped in winter mode. This topic is incredibly important because fishermen are creatures of habit. You spend all summer and fall casting, burning your lures back and getting aggressive strikes. Your muscle memory is programmed to reel fast. When March rolls around, you take that exact same muscle memory to the lake. You do what you have always done because it worked 6 months ago. People will do the exact same thing for years, catch nothing in March, and just blame the weather or say the fish have lockjaw. They never stop to think that their own hands are the actual problem. Let us start by looking at the biggest illusion in early spring fishing. You wake up, look out the window, and see the bright sun shining. The weather forecast says it is going to be 65 degrees today. You pack your truck, grab your favorite rod, and head to the lake feeling like an absolute champion. You step out onto the bank, and the air feels amazing. You take off your jacket and enjoy that warm breeze. Because you feel warm, your brain automatically tricks you into thinking the fish feel warm too. So you cast your lure out into the water and start reeling it in just like you did last August. You are burning that bait back to you, fully expecting a massive strike. But here is the harsh reality. While you are sweating in your shirt on the bank, the water temperature is still hovering around 40 degrees. The fish down there are absolutely freezing. They do not care that the sun is shining. They do not care that the calendar says it is March. They are living in an icebox. When you reel your lure past them at high speeds, they just watch it disappear. They are not physically capable of chasing it down. You are fishing for a summer fish that does not exist right now. You have to break this warm weather illusion immediately. Now let us talk about the cold, hard biology of a lethargic fish in March. Fish are cold-blooded creatures. This is a simple scientific fact that so many seasoned fishermen completely ignore when they get excited on the water. A cold-blooded animal does not regulate its own body temperature like you or I do. Their entire metabolism, their digestion, their energy levels, and their willingness to hunt are completely dictated by the temperature of the water surrounding them. In cold water, a fish is operating on minimal battery power. Their heart rate slows way down. Their need for food drops drastically because they are not burning any calories. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night in a freezing cold house and someone tells you to sprint down the street for a small piece of bread. You would tell them no. That is exactly what a bass or a walleye is thinking when your flashy lure goes zooming by their face. They look at your fast-moving bait and calculate the return on investment. If it takes more energy to chase your lure than they will get from eating it, they will not even twitch a fin. They are programmed by nature to conserve energy at all costs right now. There is a very stubborn old-school fishing rule that says you should always cover as much water as possible to find the active fish. Your grandpa probably told you this. Your dad probably told you this. You cast, you reel fast, you take 2 steps down the bank, and you repeat. The idea is that if you throw your bait in front of enough fish, eventually one of them will be hungry enough to bite. I am here to tell you that in the month of March, this ancient method is absolute garbage. Covering water quickly is a fantastic strategy for late spring and summer when fish are aggressive and willing to travel 10 feet to smash a lure. But right now, covering water quickly just means you are dragging your bait uselessly past hundreds of lethargic fish. You are just annoying them, not feeding them. In cold water, you do not need to cover miles of shoreline. You need to thoroughly and slowly pick apart the specific areas where fish are staging. If you know there is a drop-off or a rock pile holding fish, you need to park yourself right there. You have to put your bait in the strike zone and leave it there for an uncomfortable amount of time. Stop treating your fishing rod like a race car. We need to discuss the psychological trap of your own excitement. The mental game of spring fishing is half the battle. You have been sitting inside all winter long, watching fishing videos and organizing your tackle box. You have a severe case of spring fever. When you finally get out on the water, your adrenaline is pumping. Your heart is beating faster. You make that first cast, and your hands naturally want to move fast. You want to feel the vibration of the lure. You want to make something happen. This excitement translates directly into the handle of your reel. Without even realizing it, you are cranking that reel twice as fast as you should be. You have to recognize this psychological trap. You are not fishing fast because the fish want it fast. You are fishing fast because you are impatient and excited. The next time you are standing on the edge of the water early in the morning, listening to the absolute silence of the lake, look down at your hands. I guarantee they are moving too quickly. Take a deep breath, consciously tell yourself to relax, and physically force your hands to slow down. If you do not conquer your own adrenaline, the fish will easily conquer you. Let us look at a very specific scenario that happens on the water every single spring. Picture this. You are standing on the deck of your boat near a rocky point. The water is completely still. You have your favorite deep-diving crankbait tied on. You cast it out as far as you possibly can. The bait lands with a soft splash. You immediately start cranking the handle to get the bait down to the bottom. You want it to hit the rocks and bounce around. You reel constantly, and then the bait is back at your feet. Nothing happened. You do it again. Still nothing. You start to think the fish are just not here. Or maybe you think they hate the color of your lure. You change from a red lure to a green one. You cast and burn it back again. The truth is, the color does not matter at all right now. The fish are sitting right there on those rocks, watching your crankbait fly over their heads. When you use a crankbait in cold March water, you cannot blindly reel it in. You have to use a painfully slow stop-and-go method. Crank it down until it hits the bottom, and then simply stop. Let it sit there. Count to 5 slowly in your head. A lethargic fish will only strike when the bait pauses and looks exhausted. Suspending jerkbaits are known as the ultimate cold water killer, but only if you actually know how to use them. The biggest mistake people make with a jerkbait in March is completely ignoring the pause. They cast it out, twitch the rod twice, pause for 1 second, and then twitch it again. They fish it with a fast, erratic rhythm. That might work perfectly in May, but in early March, that is a recipe for disaster. The magic of a suspending jerkbait is that it stays perfectly still in the water column, right in front of the face of the fish. When the water is close to freezing, a 1 or 2 second pause is not going to cut it. You need to twitch that bait to get it down, and then you need to stop. You need to let it sit there for 10, 15, or even 20 full seconds. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know it feels like you are doing absolutely nothing. But while you are standing there feeling bored, a lethargic bass is slowly swimming up to that motionless bait, inspecting it, and deciding if it is worth eating. If you twitch the rod again before they make their decision, you just snatch their dinner right out of their mouth. You have to embrace the uncomfortably long pause. Let us visualize what that jerkbait strike actually looks like in cold water, because it is probably not what you expect. You are used to those massive, aggressive summer strikes that nearly rip the rod out of your hands. You are waiting for that solid thump. But lethargic March fish do not hit like a freight train. You make your cast, you twitch the bait down, and you wait your 15 seconds. During that long pause, your line is sitting slightly slack on the surface of the water. Deep down below, a cold bass slowly flares its gills and just inhales the stationary jerkbait. They do not turn and run with it, they just sit there. The only indication you will get is a tiny, almost invisible tick on your fishing line. Or maybe the line just slowly starts moving an inch to the left. If you are reeling too fast, or if you are not watching your line like a hawk during those long pauses, you will never even know a fish ate your bait. You will just go to twitch the rod again and feel dead weight. Slowing down means your presentation changes, but it also means your bite detection must change. You are no longer feeling for a violent attack. You are watching for a subtle mistake. Bottom contact baits like jigs and soft plastics are another trap for fast fishermen. The classic way to fish a jig is to cast it out, let it sink, and then aggressively hop it off the bottom. You snap your rod tip up, make the jig jump 2 feet in the air, and let it crash back down. That is a great way to trigger a reaction strike in warm water. But in cold March water, a jig jumping rapidly off the bottom does not look natural. It looks like a threat, or it just moves too fast for a cold fish to track. Instead of hopping your jig, you need to drag it. You cast it out into that deep, quiet water and let it settle. Then you keep your rod tip low and slowly sweep it to the side. You want to feel every single pebble, every rock, and every piece of wood on the bottom. You are just crawling that bait along the lake floor like a dying crawfish that can barely move its claws. When you hit a rock, do not pull it over instantly. Let the jig sit right next to that rock for 10 seconds. The lethargic fish are holding tight to the bottom structure. You have to literally drag the food right into their living room and leave it on the coffee table. It is time to completely destroy the myth of the cold water reaction strike. You hear professional anglers talk about this all the time. They say that if you burn a spinnerbait or a crankbait fast enough past a fish, they will bite it out of pure instinct or anger, regardless of the temperature. This has led millions of regular fishermen to waste their weekends throwing fast-moving baits into ice-cold water. Let me be clear, while a reaction strike is absolutely a real thing, it requires the fish to have the physical energy to react. In 40-degree water, the muscles of a bass are stiff. Their reaction time is severely delayed. You cannot force a frozen fish to act out of pure aggression. If you burn a bait past their face, by the time their brain registers that something flashed by, the bait is already 10 feet away. They will not chase it down. You cannot bully a cold fish into biting. You have to seduce them. You have to offer them an incredibly easy meal that requires zero effort to catch. Stop relying on the myth of the aggressive reaction strike in the early spring and start focusing on serving them a slow, helpless target. Let us talk about the extremely important relationship between the size of your lure and the speed of your retrieve. Many anglers think that early spring is the time to throw massive baits to catch a giant fish that is hungry after a long winter. You tie on a huge plastic swim bait, make a long cast, and try to reel it in slowly. But here is the problem. A massive bait requires a certain amount of speed just to make its tail kick or its body wobble properly. If you reel it slow enough for a lethargic fish to catch it, the big bait looks like a stiff, lifeless piece of plastic. If you reel it fast enough to give it the proper action, it is moving entirely too fast for the cold water fish to chase it down. You are trapped in a no-win situation. The ultimate solution is to downsize your lure right now. A smaller bait requires significantly less speed to create an enticing action. You can tie on a tiny swim bait on a light jig head, and it will have a beautiful, subtle swimming motion, even when you are barely turning the handle. The lethargic fish sees this small, easy meal moving at a snail pace, and they cannot resist it. Match a small profile with a slow speed. There is a hidden enemy out on the water that forces you to fish faster than you want to, and you probably do not even notice it. That enemy is the cold March wind. It is a windy morning. You make a long cast across a point. Before your lure even hits the water, the wind catches your fishing line and creates a massive bow in the air. When the lure finally lands, you have 20 feet of slack line sweeping across the surface. Your instinct is to immediately reel very fast to pick up all that slack and gain control of your bait. The problem is, while you are cranking rapidly to tighten your line, you are ripping your lure away from the exact spot where the fish are hiding. The wind has tricked you into a fast retrieve. To fix this, you must manage your line in the air. Keep your rod tip low to the water during the cast to prevent the wind from grabbing the line. Before the bait hits the water, manually stop the line from coming off your reel. This ensures the lure drops straight down on a tight line, allowing you to instantly begin a slow, controlled presentation. Do not let the spring winds dictate the speed of your retrieve. Your own fishing gear might be sabotaging your early spring success, specifically the gear ratio of your reel. The fishing industry has convinced us that we all need ultra-fast reels. Everyone wants a high-speed reel to burn baits and pick up line quickly. These reels are fantastic for summer topwater action or flipping heavy cover. But in March, a high-speed reel is your absolute worst enemy. When you have a reel that brings in 3 feet of line with a single turn of the handle, it becomes incredibly difficult to fish slowly. Even if you think you are turning the handle slowly, your lure is actually rocketing through the water below. You have to constantly fight your equipment to maintain a slow presentation. This is the exact time of year when those old, slow gear ratio reels sitting in your garage become incredibly valuable. A slower reel naturally limits the speed of your lure. It forces you into a sluggish rhythm. If you do not have a slow reel, you have to be extremely conscious of your hand movements. You must turn that handle at a painfully slow crawl, literally watching the reel handle move inch by inch. We have all experienced this classic conversation at the boat ramp. You pull your truck up to the ramp at noon. There is another guy tying down his boat, looking frustrated. You ask him how the fishing was. He shakes his head, complains about the cold front, and says the lake is completely dead. He swears there are no fish in the entire body of water. Meanwhile, you know for a fact the fish are there. I can almost guarantee you exactly what that guy was doing all morning. He was casting a chatterbait or a crankbait and burning it down the bank. He was fishing for active summer fish that simply do not exist in March. He did not catch anything because he outran every single fish he cast toward. This guy refuses to adapt. He blames the lake, he blames the bait color, and he blames the weatherman. He blames everything except his own right hand. Do not be the angry guy at the boat ramp. Understanding that when the water is cold, the fish are absolutely still there, and they will absolutely eat, but they dictate the terms of the engagement, not you. If you refuse to slow down and meet them on their terms, you will be the one complaining at the ramp. Let us break down the technique of the slow roll, specifically with swim baits and spinnerbaits. This is a tactic designed explicitly for lethargic fish, but most people do it completely wrong. They think a slow roll just means reeling slightly slower than normal. That is not enough. Imagine you are casting a heavy spinnerbait over a rocky bottom in deep water. A true slow roll means you let that bait sink all the way to the bottom until your line goes totally slack. Then you lift your rod tip slightly and begin turning the reel handle just fast enough to make the blades barely flutter. You want that bait to physically bump into the rocks and tick the tops of the deep weeds as it crawls back to you. If you can no longer feel the bottom, you are reeling entirely too fast. You need to stop, let it fall back down, and start again even slower. You are keeping the bait in the deepest, most stable water column, where the fish are hiding from the cold. It requires extreme patience to drag a heavy lure through deep water at a snail pace, but this is exactly how you catch the biggest fish of the entirely early spring season. Since slowing down is primarily a mental battle, you need to use specific mental tricks to force yourself to maintain the right speed. I know how hard it is to break old habits. When I am on the water in early March and I catch myself reeling too fast, I literally start playing a slow song in my head. I find a slow rhythm and I match the turning of my reel handle to that beat. If I start turning the handle faster than the song, I know I am messing up. Another great trick is to simply not look at the water where your bait is. If you stare at the spot where your lure landed, your brain naturally wants to bring it back quickly to cast again. Instead, look at your reel handle. Watch your own fingers turning it. Force yourself to make each full rotation take 3 or 4 seconds. Make a game out of how slowly you can retrieve a single cast. Sometimes I will cast out, put my rod under my arm, and put my hands in my pockets for 20 seconds just to force the bait to sit completely still on the bottom. You have to actively trick your own impatient brain if you want to catch lethargic, cold water fish. We also need to talk about water temperature zones and how they trick anglers into speeding up. During a sunny March afternoon, the shallow water in the back of a protected cove might warm up by 2 or 3 degrees. You look at your electronics, see that slight temperature bump, and instantly think the fish are going to go crazy. You switch from your slow, dragging tactics to a fast-moving spinnerbait. You start burning it through the shallows. This is a massive mistake. A 2-degree bump in water temperature might draw the fish into the shallows to soak up the sun, but it does not instantly turn them into aggressive summer hunters. They are still lethargic. They are just lethargic in slightly warmer water. They moved shallow to get comfortable, not to run a sprint. You still have to use your incredibly slow retrieval methods. You cast your light jig or your weightless plastic into that shallow, warmer water, and you barely move it. Let it sit in the sun right in front of them. Do not let a tiny warming trend fool you into abandoning the painfully slow presentation that actually gets bites. If you really want to understand the extreme end of fishing slowly, you need to look at the dead sticking technique. This is heavily used by crappie and panfish anglers, but it works perfectly for bigger predator fish in March as well. Dead sticking is exactly what it sounds like. You cast your bait out, usually a soft plastic on a light jig head, let it fall to your desired depth, and then you do absolutely nothing. You hold the rod completely still. You do not twitch it, you do not reel, you just hold it dead. The tiny, almost imperceptible movements of the water currents and the slight shaking of your own hand holding the rod will give the bait all the subtle, shivering action it needs. To a freezing, lethargic fish, a dead-sticked bait looks like an easy, dying meal that is just hovering helplessly in the water column. It takes an incredible amount of discipline to just stand there holding a rod perfectly still for a minute straight. Every fiber of your being wants to twitch that rod tip. But when the water is frigid, a motionless bait will outfish a fast-moving bait every single day of the week. We need to have a serious conversation about the psychological barrier of boredom. Fishing incredibly slow is not visually exciting. It is not an action-packed movie. There is no adrenaline rush when you are just staring at your line and doing nothing for 20 seconds at a time. The truth is, fishing this way can be intensely boring for an active person. You cast out, you let the bait fall, and you wait. You wait some more. Your mind starts to wander. You start thinking about what you have to do at work tomorrow. You look at your phone. And right when you get bored, your hand automatically starts reeling faster to speed up the process. You want to feel the action again. You want to cast again. This impatience is exactly what saves the lives of countless fish every single March. The moment you give in to the boredom and speed up your retrieve, you take your bait right out of the strike zone. You have to learn to embrace the boredom. Consider it a strict test of your willpower. Turn the boredom into intense concentration. Focus entirely on feeling every tiny pebble your bait touches. Watch your line like a hawk. Let us address how you actually detect a bite when you are fishing this slowly, because it changes everything. When you are burning a bait in the summer, the fish hook themselves. They hit it so hard the rod bends in half. But when you are creeping a jig along the bottom in March, the bite is a ghost. A lethargic fish does not attack. They just open their mouth and suck the bait in while barely moving. You will not feel a sharp tap. You will not feel a jerk. What you will feel is heaviness. It feels exactly like you just snagged a wet leaf or a small plastic bag. Your rod tip just gets slightly heavy. This is where most anglers fail. They feel that mushy heaviness, assume it is just some dead weeds from last year, and they try to aggressively rip the lure free. By doing that, they pull the bait right out of the mouth of a massive fish. When you are fishing painfully slow in early spring, and your line suddenly feels heavy or mushy, do not ignore it. Lean back into it with a firm, sweeping hook set. Always assume that wet leaf is actually the biggest fish of your entire season. As we move later into the month of March and approach true spring, you have to know how to adjust your speed gradually. The mistake people make is flipping a switch. They go from painfully slow one week to burning baits the next week just because the calendar changed. The warming of a lake is a very slow, gradual process. Your retrieval speed needs to increase just as gradually. If you were pausing your jerkbait for 15 seconds in early March, maybe you only pause it for 8 seconds in late March. If you were dragging your jig an inch at a time, maybe you start giving it a very tiny hop. You have to let the fish tell you what they want. Start your morning with the ultra-slow, lethargic presentation. If they are aggressively eating it on the fall or ignoring the pause, then you can slowly dial up the speed. But never start your day by burning a bait. Always default to the slow presentation first. Earning a bite in cold water is entirely about respect. You have to respect the biology of the fish and the temperature of the water. If you match their sluggish mood, you will catch them. Let us bring all of this together. The number one reason you are catching zero fish in early spring is not the color of your lure. It is not the spot you picked, and it is certainly not bad luck. It is your absolute refusal to slow down your hands. The biggest plot twist in cold water fishing is realizing that success is entirely a mental game, not a physical one. You have to fight your own excitement, embrace the boring pauses, and force your presentation to match the freezing reality of the underwater world. When you finally stop fishing like it is the middle of summer, you will unlock an entirely new season of massive catches. The guy who fishes the slowest is the guy who wins in March. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you realize you have been fishing way too fast, please hit that subscribe button right now and drop a like on the video. It really helps the channel grow. Now, I want to hear from you down in the comments. What is the absolute longest you have ever forced yourself to pause a lure in cold water? Let us get a debate going.